Let me start with some numbers. A week and a half ago, the Census Bureau released a report on changing demographics. 25% of children today under 5 are Latino. Some numbers affecting those kids. 50% of those kids are immigrant or born to immigrant families. 75% live in poverty, and 75% are English language learners. As a premier Latino civil rights organization in this country, we cannot help but be concerned about how learning is changing for those children and how we're going to participate in new learning. It is very tempting to sit here and talk about all the inequities, because there are a lot of them, and I'll just repeat a few phrases from this morning to remind you of what they are. The 4th grade slump, lack of prepared mentors, I said there are a lot, and there are. A qualifier when we account for access, when we account for mothers' education and comparisons. All those are things that sort of point out what the inequities are. And as I said, I could go on and on about those. But as I thought about what I wanted to talk to you about today, I'd really rather talk about the promise and the opportunities that we have, not only for Latino children, but all poor children. I think we need to look at what they bring. Latino children alone are in families that are headed by very young people who have the opportunity to learn new ways of doing things and who want to learn new ways of doing things. In the Latino community, we often talk about the lack of computers in the home, but we don't talk about the fact that Latino families have a very high use of cell phones, have a very high use of gaming consoles, and a very high use of Game Boys and those sorts of things. Lots of opportunities for us to impact learning at that level. But let me, with the remaining 3 minutes probably that I have, let me talk about what we as a community-based organization can do to support this new wave of learning. And when I talk about we, I'm not just talking about NCLR, I'm talking about the Urban League, I'm talking about lots of other community-based organizations that touch families today. First of all, we all have a tradition of advocacy, and we really need to continue that tradition of advocacy, especially when it comes to advocating on the Hill, and I am also so sorry that the congressman left. We really need to talk about inserting new ways of learning very specifically into legislation, because we all know, unfortunately, that opportunities for poor children in learning have often been driven by federal legislation. We need to advocate for new ways of looking at learning for all children. We need to advocate for lots of attention to be paid for children who are English language learners, children who are learning disabled, and how we can use new technologies. Someone needs to be there to be their voice as legislation is being created. We need to advocate with industry, and I'm so glad you said that. We need to remind industry who their market is and who the future workforce is and what they need to be creating today to make sure we, as a country, remain strong because we've met the needs of all people. The second thing we can do as community-based organizations is bring in families in a way that we never have before. That means helping families understand what learning means today in the 21st century and what it's going to mean for their children as they go through high school. It means capitalizing on what we know about strong families in poor communities and how we can use an intergenerational approach to focus on new ways of learning and bring in the entire family. It means that we can help expose families to new digital media because we're closer to them in the community, and we can be that sort of translator, and we can be that ambassador to bring them in. We can also work very closely with communities in ways that perhaps other institutions can't. As community-based organizations, we need to become active players in the optimal use of technology in our communities. We need to become major players in developing appropriate mentorships for families and for other community members in leading us toward the appropriate and expanded use of digital technology to create learning. Finally, we need to look at our work as community-based organizations with researchers and remind the researchers about what we still don't know. We still don't know about how we connect the old divide with the new divide and erase those divides, how we tie literacy in with digital media. We need to remind researchers about how children grow up in different circumstances, and we need to account for those differences as we're moving forward and creating new ways of learning. As I end my comments, I would urge us all to take the best advantage of where we are today, moving toward a new way of learning, but to be ever mindful of the possible unintended consequences and to make sure that we avoid those as we move forward.
Well, thank you.